The island can only be reached by ferry, which operates daily. I spend my days here swimming, fishing, hiking, or enjoying a relaxing day at the beach. My favorite thing to do is wake up early in the morning when the tide is low and go to Sand Beach to collect hermit crabs or find sand dollars. However, in the past few years there haven't been as many, and I started to wonder why and if this was due to climate change. The lobster business booms on the south side of the island. There are many wharfs and co-ops that operate from just before dawn to the late afternoon. Swans Island is one of those communities that rely heavily on fishing to maintain a steady income. During an interview, Sonny Sprague, a retired lobsterman on the island, voiced his concerns about the future of the island's lobster industry. Before retiring, he had started to notice the decline in the number of lobsters and various species he would pull up from a trap. He also mentioned the island has shifted to using frozen bait that is left over from previous catches, something they haven't done before. The bait they mainly use is herring, which has been disappearing from traps near the island. He worries that if the scarcity continues, the fisheries on the island will be forced to shut down due to the amount of profit being outweighed by the expenditures of the fisheries. By the way, these are some pictures of me when I was younger on the island. Climate change and global warming have been major ongoing issues for many decades, and much of it is going unnoticed. However, the evidence is overwhelming and life on Earth is vulnerable. According to Rebecca Lindsay, a senior science writer and editor, Earth's temperature has risen by an average of 0.14 degrees Fahrenheit per decade since 1880, or about 2 degrees Fahrenheit in total. Given the tremendous size and heat capacity of the oceans, it takes a massive amount of heat energy to raise Earth's average yearly surface temperature by even a small amount. Since the 1800s, humans have been the main cause of climate change. Human activities such as burning fossil fuels, cutting down forests, using gas-powered vehicles, and farming livestock are some of the many ways extensive amounts of greenhouse gases are being released into the atmosphere. Greenhouse gas emissions act as a blanket wrapped around the Earth, trapping the sun's heat and causing temperatures to rise. This is known as the greenhouse effect. The United States Environmental Protection Agency states that people have increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the air by 40% since the late 1700s. As you can see in this graph, the average surface temperature of the Earth has increased dramatically since 1880. With the rise of temperature in the air, the oceans are also increasing in temperature. According to Philip Shelley, a senior editor and creative strategist at the University of New England, since 2004, the Gulf of Maine has been warming at about 0.23 degrees Celsius per year, which means that in the past 15 years, the Gulf has warmed over 3 degrees Celsius. And this may not seem like a lot, but 20,000 years ago, the Earth was only 5 degrees warmer than it is today, and there were glaciers in the Gulf of Maine. The Gulf of Maine stretches from Cape Cod to Nova Scotia and is a key intersection between cold water masses from the Arctic and warm water masses from the Gulf Stream. According to the Maine Climate Council, the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of the world's oceans. This is due to the fact that the Gulf is relatively shallow, which allows it to absorb more atmospheric heat than any other ocean. The increase is also allowing it to absorb more atmospheric heat. The increase is also taking place because there's a strengthened northward infiltration of warm subsurface water in the summer months. Also, fresh water is being pumped into the ocean as the ice melts, which is altering circulation patterns in the Gulf. This is causing the cold current coming from the Gulf Stream to become weaker, allowing more warm water to enter the area. In 2022, the Gulf of Maine Research Institute announced that 2021 was the warmest on record in the Gulf. Average sea surface temperatures in early October that used to hover around 60 degrees Fahrenheit were nearly 5 degrees warmer. With the sea temperature rising in Maine, many aquatic species are experiencing population declines or even extinction in the Gulf. This graph shows the increase in sea temperature from 1980 until 2020. As you can see, it has been increasing over time with a sharp increase around 2019, and this line is estimated to continue increasing. Dan Rabitsky, a science journalist from WeForum, states that climate change could wipe out 60% of all fish species in the Gulf of Maine. If this were to happen, fisheries in the Gulf would face many complications. According to the Maine Climate Council, climate change also increases acidity in the ocean, levels of which have already risen 30% worldwide and will continue to rise alongside growing greenhouse gas levels. The world's oceans are absorbing excess carbon dioxide at a rapid rate, causing the chemistry of the water to change. When carbon dioxide dissolves into seawater, it makes carbonic acid, making the water more acidic. The United States Environmental Protection Agency states ocean acidity has increased about 25% from pre-industrial times to the early 21st century, a pace faster than any known in the Earth's geologic past. Ocean acidification is a huge threat to marine ecosystems. It makes it harder for shellfish such as oysters, scallops, mussels, sand dollars, hermit crabs, and lobsters to build strong shells, making them more vulnerable to disease and predators. Eric Stokestad, a reporter for Science magazine who covers environmental research and issues, writes, "Fish mirror the temperature of the water they swim in. When the water gets too warm, the enzymes they use for digestion and other functions are less efficient, impairing growth and reproduction. Species that do not like the warmer conditions and are having trouble adapting are migrating north towards Canada where the water is colder and in their temperature range, leaving unsubstantial amounts of fish for fisheries in the Gulf of Maine." One very important species to the Gulf of Maine that fuels the North Atlantic food web is being drastically affected by the warmer waters. The Calanus finmarchus is a zooplankton feasted on by many species, including herring, mackerel, cod, right whales, and lobsters. Derek Jackson, a UCS fellow in climate and energy at the Center for Science and Democracy, writes, "This copepod, or microscopic crustacean, is the keystone of the subpolar food web that makes the Gulf of Maine one of Earth's richest marine ecosystems." Jackson also writes, "The decline of Calanus populations coincides with current and projected declines for many fish populations in the Gulf." Lobsters rely heavily on zooplankton in the early stages of their life. In their larval stage, they spend several weeks feeding on zooplankton to fuel their growing and changing bodies. Recently, scientists at the Bigelow Lab in Maine have linked the decline of the Calanus finmarchus to the decline of lobster larvae. As the Calanus shifts north, species such as the lobster are following the population or staying in the Gulf and struggling to find a new food source. The green crab population in Maine has exploded due to the warmer waters, and they've become an invasive species. This is because they are able to tolerate a wide range of salinities and temperatures. In fact, the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List considers them to be one of the world's most invasive species, partly because they cause a lot of damage to eelgrass beds. This grass protects the coast from erosion and provides habitats for many fish. Also, clam landings have plummeted in the past 30 years, with 2017 landings being the lowest since 1930. The Gulf of Maine Institute reports a single adult green crab can eat up to 40 juvenile clams in one day. The green crabs also compete with lobsters and native crabs for food. They will sometimes also eat juvenile lobsters and crabs. And they could also be a possible explanation for the decline of blue mussels. Species are not only leaving the Gulf of Maine, but also entering from the south as they are trying to escape warming temperatures. Also, species that are attracted to warmer waters are coming from the north. These new species interactions will have major impacts as the ecosystems face disruptions due to climate change. New species may confuse the food web, changing the populations of species already present in the Gulf. In 2012, there was an intense heat wave, much like the one happening now. On the coast of Maine, the shrimp population decreased drastically because they were very sensitive to the warmer water, and they were consumed by long-finned squid who migrated from the south. The shrimp fishery in Maine has been closed since this warming period in 2012. The stock has shown very little recovery and is still considered a depleted source. Also, during 2012, lobsters were confused by the ocean temperature and moved inshore many weeks earlier than normal, causing an increase in landings that outstripped market demand and led to a price collapse. It is important that fisheries learn how to adapt to the rising temperatures so events that happened in 2012 are not repeated. The National Resource Council of Maine says, "Commercial fishing is one of Maine's largest industries, bringing in more than $600 million per year and employing thousands of people. And climate change now threatens this iconic Maine industry." Due to the rapid warming, fish species that have thrived in Maine for all of recorded history and fisheries in Maine that have fished for generations are being adversely affected. As species are dying off and migrating north, fisheries are struggling to keep up with the demand for seafood. Fishermen have begun to catch fewer fish and smaller fish, which brings down their profit. Because of ocean acidification, there are more soft-shelled lobsters in the ocean than hard-shelled lobsters, which sell for less money than hard-shelled lobsters. Andrew Pershing, the Director of Climate Science at Climate Central, states, "At these levels of warming, lobster abundance in the Gulf of Maine will decline 42 to 62%. Fisheries are going to shrink and not be as productive as they were a couple years ago, and this will have a rippling effect on the economy." Communities that highly depend on a low diversity of species are expected to be at the greatest risk from the impacts of climate change. Fisheries may need to start diversifying their product in order to maintain a steady income. Jennifer Hellman, an integrative biologist, states, "Having a wide range of products in your portfolio helps hedge against downturns in a specific market." In fact, many fisheries have begun to look toward the future and have started farms or the process of aquaculture. For example, Jason Matthews, a lobsterman who lives on Swans Island, has begun an oyster farm. During an interview, Matthews informed me that he started the farm as an experiment, not expecting much out of it, but soon it bloomed into a small business for him and his wife, Jamie. Currently, the Matthews are taking care of 200,000 oysters. He sells them at the market on Swans Island and also to restaurants in Bar Harbor, Maine. Wayne Lemoyne and his wife, Laurel, have also started to diversify by starting kelp farms on Swans Island. They are the first people on the island to farm kelp. Kelp has become very popular because it is versatile and has many health benefits. Both oyster and kelp farming use methods that don't harm the sea. They actually have positive effects on fisheries by removing harmful nitrogen from the water and neutralizing acidity. The picture to the left is a picture of Jason and Jamie Matthews. The picture in the middle is an oyster farm, and the picture to the right is an example of a kelp farm. Oyster and kelp farms are both examples of aquaculture. Aquaculture is breeding, raising, and harvesting fish, shellfish, or plants. Increasing aquaculture along the coast of Maine could help with keeping up with the demand for seafood. Aquaculture improves food security and nutrition by increasing the amount of seafood available for people to eat, which then boosts economic growth. Currently, Maine has over 200 farms and more than 700 farmers. According to the Maine Aquaculture Association, the aquaculture industry in Maine has nearly tripled from $50 million in 2007 to $137 million in 2014. This number has continued to grow over the years and will continue to grow when the industry increases. Currently, only 1% of Maine's waters are being used for aquaculture. Aquaculture is a healthy and efficient alternative for the environment, and it produces the lowest carbon footprints of any animal protein in Maine. There isn't a main solution to climate change. However, there are many small changes that can make a difference. Overfishing is a huge problem right now within fisheries. If overfishing continues, species could be totally wiped out from the Gulf of Maine. Eric Stokestad writes, "We have to stop overfishing to let the gene pool survive so that the fish can adapt to climate change." To combat this problem, more regulations could be added to catches. Fisheries should also start to closely monitor species and habitat changes in order to fully understand how fish populations are being affected, and then use that information to fish in a productive way. Fisheries could also take advantage of the new species entering the Gulf and look for marketing opportunities with those species. For the average person, there isn't much of a solution they can provide. However, there are smaller tasks they can do every day to limit their carbon footprint, leading to a decrease in climate change. In the U.S., emissions in 2020 were 14.6 tons of CO2 per person. In order to preserve a livable climate, this number needs to decrease to around 2 to 2.5 tons of CO2 per person by 2030. Simple ways to limit emissions include using LED lights, using electronic efficient appliances, washing laundry with cold water, eating more plants and fewer animals, walking or biking, not wasting food, and always reduce, reuse, and recycle. After thinking about the outcome of this project for a very long time, I decided I wanted to connect it to the work I'm doing in my Photography 2 class. I've always wanted to take pictures of Swans Island with my film camera because it is a place that is very important to me. And finally, I had the chance. Over February break, I took a trip to Maine with my dad, hoping to take pictures with my film camera of fisheries on Swans Island. I spent many hours walking around in the snow and cold on the island trying to find the perfect subjects to capture. Upon returning, I had 4 rolls of film to process, enlarge, tone, and mount. After many hours in the photography studio, I produced 17 pictures that capture Maine fisheries and their magnetism. My pictures depict Maine as a lonely, desolate place, which is a feeling I get when I think about the effects of climate change. I hope that other people looking at my photos feel the same way and see why there is a need to protect fisheries in Maine and also the earth. These are most of my pictures on the slide, and then I have some pictures up front to look at. And my pictures will be hung up in Morse Foyer starting next week for a couple days. I'd like to thank Sunny Sprague, Jason Matthews, and Randy Smith for the interviews, and also my parents for their support. Thank you for listening. Is there any questions? Okay.
Hi, Maren, Dr. Polsenberg. First of all, you chose a topic very dear to my heart, looking at fisheries, and I really want to commend you on the many ways you approached it. You talked about the science problem, you talked in detail about ocean acidification, which really people haven't come to understand, or most people don't yet understand how significant that impact is at the lowest levels, most important and lowest levels in the food chain. Economics, you looked at that, and then you also looked at it through an artistic eye, which was fantastic. I have just one question, because it's again, close to my heart. Marine mammals, seals, whales, are also very important in this area. Did you get to talk to anybody or learn anything about the humpback whales, for example, spend a lot of their life, a lot of their year, feeding in the Gulf of Maine. They come up to feed in the Gulf of Maine, and then they migrate south to mate and have their calves. Did you learn anything about changes in the humpback whale or other whale populations in the Gulf of Maine?
I didn't look too much into that, but I assume their population is also kind of being affected because, I mean, the zooplankton is disappearing and they feed a lot on that too, so I assume their population is decreasing also, but I'm not quite sure. I shot 4 rolls of film, and it was very hard to choose which pictures to print from that. It took a while. Yes, I had 4 rolls of film.
Any other questions? Okay.
I was wondering, you mentioned how you wanted the pictures to look kind of lonely and barren. I was wondering what other considerations or what other things you took into consideration when deciding what to take a picture of, and then also which pictures to print out.
Yes, well, I wanted to take a lot of pictures of, I guess, boats, and I have a lot of pictures of lobster traps also, and when I got there, I was hoping to take pictures of lobsters, but none of the wharfs or co-ops were open, so that was a little disappointing. And also, I was hoping to get some pictures of like fishermen, but also they weren't there. But yes, I was trying to take a lot of pictures of boats and I guess buildings and like just the fisheries in general.
All right, one more round of applause for me. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, we help take this down because we need these in another venue. We'll get our next presenter to come and get ready. I think that's Aiden. I saw Aiden up here.
Do you have the order of who's going next? So I can decide now whose slide should go up.
Aiden? Levy? Oh, after Aiden, you mean?
I mean the person who's going next. So just Aiden.
Yep.
Okay.
An American epidemic.
Okay. Aiden Levy right here.
There you go. Here, let me introduce you.
Of course.
Where did Aiden go? Is he coming? I thought he was sitting back, right back there. Where'd he go? Where did he? Oh, he went to the back. Oh, he's right here. Okay. Oops. There we go. Okay. We're ready for our next presenter, who will speak to us.